Good evening. Welcome to this candidates forum for the Irvington School Board. My name is Susan Maggiato, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the River Towns. The forum is co-sponsored by the Irvington PTSA, and we do thank them for their participation. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the League. The League was founded in 1920, the year the 19th Amendment was passed, granting women the right to vote. For over 100 years, the League has been a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. This forum is a good example of that effort. As I said, the League is nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose candidates or political parties, but we do work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and we seek to influence public policy through education and advocacy. Membership in the League is open to anyone 16 years of age or older. This forum will be recorded and available for later viewing. There will be links on the River Towns League website and Facebook page and your school district website to the location on YouTube. A word about our recording policy that all the candidates have agreed to. Only the entities authorized by the League may record or live stream this forum. Only licensed media, including TV, radio, and newspapers, are entitled by FCC regulations to air portions of the recording. Everyone else who wants to stream or broadcast it must do so in its entirety. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Debbie Reister. Debbie is a resident of Rye and a member of the board of directors of the League of Women Voters of Rye, Rybrook, and Portchester. And with that, I will turn the forum over to the moderator.
Good evening, everyone. And I want to thank you all for participating in this really important exercise in democracy. And I want to thank each of the candidates for your willingness to serve the public and to put yourselves out there to participate in this essential process of democracy, which is running for open election. I applaud you all. So the format for this evening's forum will be as follows. At the beginning of the forum, the moderator, that's me, will explain the rules for the forum and introduce each candidate. The forum will follow a traditional format, beginning with an opening statement from each candidate, followed by a question and response period, followed by closing statements. The order of candidates' opening statements will be determined using a non-biased approach determined by the League. The reverse order will be used for closing statements. The allotted time for opening and closing statements will be 1 minute. Audience questions will be collected by email or electronic form prior to the start of this forum, which they were, and questions must include the name and address to ensure the person asking the question is a district resident. This information will remain confidential. A committee consisting of League and PTA members reviewed and sorted the questions, considering relevancy to the office and the topic and redundancy. I will address each question to all candidates, and each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond. The order in which candidates will respond will be rotated by me to ensure fairness. Question response times will be strictly enforced. A timekeeper, which is Ms. Maggiotto, will be visible on the screen, and she will alert the moderator and the candidates when 15 seconds or when 30 seconds, correct?
Right.
Susan? 30 seconds of response time are remaining, and then when to stop. A candidate will be allowed to finish a sentence once started, but then that's it. Each candidate will be allowed 2 rebuttals in the course of the event. Rebuttal time will be 30 seconds, and there will be no responses to rebuttals. During the closing statements, the moderator may grant a request for rebuttal if I deem it appropriate. The candidates will not interrupt one another or the moderator during the forum. The moderator will have the authority to pause the proceedings to enforce the ground rules and the format. Candidates will not be provided with any of the questions in advance, and they weren't. Substitute spokespeople were not allowed. as that is against league rules, and except for time limits, the only restriction on candidate statements and answers is respect and civility. I would add to that I define that as personal attacks. I'm not looking for personal attacks. I'm looking for discussions of policy and issues. So thank you very much. And with that, I would like to invite Andrea Flynn to give the first opening statement.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Flynn, and I'm excited to be running for a seat on the Board of Education here in Irvington. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I was able to do so thanks to the education that I received in public schools. I believe strongly in the transformative power and possibility of public school. I've lived in Irvington for 7 years, and next year I'll have children at Dow's Lane, Main Street School, and the middle school, giving me a deep connection to and firsthand experience in 3 of our district's 4 schools. Joining the board would really be an extension of my life's work. I have an MPA from Columbia University and have dedicated my entire career to supporting children and families as a leading advocate at some of the nation's most influential think tanks and teaching graduate students at Columbia's School of Public Health. Working with students and building academic programs is one of my greatest pleasures. I've loved working so closely with many community members over the past few years in my role as co-chair of the PTSA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and I'm eager to advance the important work that we've started together. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like to invite Erin Bernstein to give her opening statement.
Hi, thank you, Susan and Debbie, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the PTSA for organizing this event. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Bernstein, and I am currently seeking a second term on the board. My dedication to our children receiving an exceptional education is evident in my involvement in the district prior to joining the board, as I spent 2 years successfully advocating for an early world language program in our elementary schools. My passion for education, and particularly for providing access to education, began over 20 years ago when I held the lead finance role managing public and charter schools in underserved urban areas across the country. I currently am the CFO of a top-rated independent school in New York City. My experience allows me to fully understand the competing priorities that exist within our district, and I'm confident in my ability to navigate through challenges to ensure better outcomes for everyone. My financial expertise provides a unique critical lens that I currently contribute to the board. It proves most helpful when I'm reviewing budgets, contracts, engaging in union negotiations, and I'm proud to have participated in the union negotiation team, which resulted in an approved MOA prior to the expiration of the current contract. No easy feat. If reelected, I'll continue to ensure that the board's financial oversight is performed consistently and in a manner that's transparent to the entire community. My desire to maintain safe and secure schools is driven by my personal experience with the Newtown, Connecticut community. While the pandemic has taken some focus away from this issue,
Erin,
focus.
It's got to be more than one sentence.
It is. I started with thank you, though, so I'm hoping I can get a couple more seconds. Safe and secure schools transcends beyond physical safety.
Please don't work it into another one of your answers. Mr. Graber.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reisner, Ms. Maggiotto, appreciate it. Good evening, Irvington. My name is David Graber, and my family and I have lived here in Irvington for over a decade, seeing both of our children through the schools here, one currently in 6th grade and the other in 10th. I am a 6-year incumbent on the Board of Education, and I'm extremely proud of the work we've been able to accomplish during my tenure on this dynamic team. Change happens with stable leadership that engages stakeholders and uses that feedback over time to design a strong, comprehensive education plan. Now, over the course of tonight's conversation, I'm going to speak to some of our accomplishments over the last 6 years. But first, I want to share my background to help frame why I'm the strongest candidate. I'm a 20-year veteran of the New York City Department of Ed, having served in a variety of roles, from a teacher to a principal to a senior director to an assistant superintendent, which positions me very strongly to do this work it gives us a lens to strengthen our board by ensuring there's an informed eye as it pertains to policy, budget, HR within the complex world of a K-12 school district, because it doesn't function like it does in the higher ed world or the private sector. I provide the board with a volunteer who has a deep background in managing academic and social emotional development in children and teaching professionals. This background, along with my experience on the board here in Irvington, should help you make me your choice to continue leading the work we began 6 to 7 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Graber. Thank you. All right. Well, now we will enter the question and answer portion of the program. I promised to mix up the order of the candidates, I'm going to invite David Graeber to answer the first question. Then I'm going to ask Andrea Flynn to answer, and then Erin Bernstein. So the first question is, what are your top 2 priorities as a member of the Board of Education?
That's difficult to distill down to just 2, but if because there are many priorities occurring equally. There are 2 main priorities at this particular juncture. One is academic recovery. How are we going to academically recover from the pandemic? Looking at the programs and pieces of things that we put in budgets that we vote on to make sure that our students, our children, recover from the pandemic in a strong and positive way. The other most important piece, in order for that to happen, our commitment, even through the pandemic, to the social emotional work and the DEI work, the diversity and inclusion work, is critical, because that work is founded in building welcoming and supporting environments. And if we're going to go on a path of academic recovery, doing that work is really important. As a part of our board, we prioritize this strongly. In particular, I was at the forefront of pushing social emotional work and making sure that before we hire more counselors, that we make sure we have a solid social emotional plan in place, that we follow through on that. And now we're actually looking to further build that. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we also want to talk about, outside of, racial barriers and things to that effect, we want to talk about students with disabilities. And we want to talk about students with economic disadvantages and how we're serving them the most. So when we talk about social, emotional, and diversity and inclusion, those, that's a key priority in order to make the academic recovery component work. So those are my top 2 priorities.
You're muted, Debbie, but I think maybe you're calling on me.
You think that this is the first time on Zoom, wouldn't you? Yes, Andrea, I am calling on you. And would you like me to repeat the question?
No, it's okay. I got
Okay.
it. Thank you. So I agree, this is a hard question, and there are a lot of competing priorities and things that take precedence at the same time. I would say, like David, focusing on equity in our schools is critically important. The district has made some really important headway on this in partnership with stakeholders across the community. I was really happy to lead the PTSA's DEI committee over the past few years, partnered really closely with Dr. Harrison and other leaders in the administration to institute some really important programs that have pulled together faculty, staff, parents, members of the administration, and even students to really help us identify where we're doing well, where we're not doing so well, where we could grow. And I think what we learned is that even though we have an incredibly strong foundation to build on, there are a number of students who we could be serving better as a district. And as David said, that certainly includes Black students and Latino and Latina students in the district, but also low-income students, students with disabilities, and English language learners. And the second piece, I would say, ensuring that our academics are strong, not only in terms of how our students are performing and their ability to catch up on what's been lost over the past couple of years, but ensuring that our programs and policies and practices are really up to date, that they're teaching our students to navigate the world and be critical thinkers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Erin Bernstein, would you like to give the question again?
I think I'm good. Thank you, Debbie.
Okay.
So that is a hard question, right? To break it down to 2 priorities. I would say I would start one of my focuses on social and emotional learning and social emotional health of every member of our community. And that includes teachers, staff, faculty, and of course the students. I think the pandemic, and a lot of this is anecdotal, just as I work in a school in a K-12 environment, and being in Irvington, what I've heard repeatedly is that children are socially and emotionally a year behind because of the pandemic. So while there may have been some academic loss, the social and emotional loss was far greater. And I think without a strong foundation, and to David's point, we've approved some counselors in our budgets to help support those students. regaining any academic loss, I think, is virtually impossible. Kids are in families right now where parents are stressed, teachers are stressed. Everyone is really going through this transformational phase in their life. And I don't think we're even going to fully understand the impact of it for years to come. So my focus really is initially really on that and strengthening the social emotional health of everyone in the community. I'm serving on the SEL committee within the district, working with the teachers and the faculty as they learn skills and coping mechanisms and things to help our students and one another. And then the other piece of it, which just plays to my wheelhouse, is of course ensuring financial and fiscal stability and sustainability of our district. We're lucky to have received some additional funds from the state. I think it's primarily due to the legalization of gambling, which just seems, you know, a little odd. But with that, we're able to expand some of our programs, stay within the tax cap. And I think when things are going well within a district, people tend to ignore finances, and it's actually the time you got to really buckle down and stay focused on it. So those are my two priorities.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
All right, so it's for the second question. I'm going to invite Erin Bernstein to answer first, David Graber to answer second, and Andrea Flynn to answer third. The question is, please name 2 things you think the Board of Education has successfully achieved in the last 3 years.
Okay, one is we've, maintained budgets that are within the tax cap. We've, aside from cutting a world language program, which I wouldn't say is a success, we've maintained programs. We're expanding social and emotional learning. So I think fiscal sustainability and responsibility is a huge success for the board, for the district. And the other component of success, and I participated in this, so I'm actually really proud of the fact that we've successfully navigated a union negotiation. I had to do this in my professional life as well in the past year. It's not an easy feat. I think we have great teachers, great faculty, great staff. It was a really collaborative experience. I'm proud to have been a part of it. And I think it's a huge, huge, huge success for the district to get it done in a really timely manner, and for us to be able to then continue to move ahead and focus on other priorities within the district. So that's.
Thank you.
Am I talking too fast now?
That is entirely your call. David Graber.
Yes, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Please name 2 things you think the Board of Education has successfully achieved in the last 3 years.
Gosh, whoever asked that question is going to have to forgive me up front, because 6 years is a long time. So I can say without any hesitation that the recent settlement of the labor contract is a huge achievement. This was a groundbreaking one, considering the last one that I've also had the opportunity to work on took an enormous amount of time, and we were able this time to really focus and put together a great contract for both sides that's very fiscally responsible, but also gives our teachers a lot of the things they want, focusing in on some really, really great things like some of the foundations of the work we're doing, like professional learning for folks. I think another piece, and I can't, forgive me, but I know we're in the process of it, but the second bond that the town voted on, and sort of shepherding that, the upgrade of the facilities. This is really over 6 years. But there were 2 bonds over the 6 years that I've been around. So the second bond really has done a good job of not only taking the fields to what we made them look like prior, but putting in the learning pavilion, the outdoor learning pavilion, and the new stands has really driven school spirit. And those are 2 hugely successful things that will raise the profile of our school district over time. Not to mention the many other things over the other years, like developing a K-12 STEM program that continues to evolve, which we did not have before I came on the board, which was a key driver of making curriculum transparent. We talk a lot about transparency. I was able, through a lot of hard work, to make the curriculum transparent in this district, and I'm really proud of that.
Thank you. Andrea Flynn, would you like to answer the third?
Yes, thanks. I would agree that negotiating the union contract has been incredibly important and a major success of this board. It's really ensured that our teachers, we found an equitable outcome, and that we're really recognizing our teachers for their incredible achievements, particularly during an incredible hard few years of the pandemic. And the other piece I'd like to raise and give the board credit for is supporting the district's strategic planning related to DEI. 3 years ago, there was not an effort at the district level to advance this work the same way that we're seeing now. And the board really implemented the DEI work into the district strategic planning and helped budget for that work, along with other organizations in the community that helped fund it. But what we've seen is that we are really ahead of many districts in Westchester in relation to our DEI work, and that other districts will look to us for some of the work that we've done. And I do think there is a lot of work to be done, but we should also pause and celebrate the work that we've been able to do. And the fact that so many stakeholders in our community have come forward with open hearts and minds and real commitment to improving our schools and improving the environment for all of our students. So I think we should celebrate that as well.
Thank you. All
Can I
right.
ask a quick question, Ms. Reisner?
Yes.
You mentioned the rebuttal process. I wonder if that could be an add-on process rather than a rebuttal, because I wanted to add on to something that Ms. Flynn had said, but I don't know how that works in terms of.
I'm not going to parse your rebuttal. If you'd like 30 seconds for a rebuttal, you certainly may opt that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what you said, Ms. Flynn, in that, one of the greatest accomplishments throughout the pandemic was actually sticking to that plan and ensuring that it stayed the top priority and what it very easily could have fallen by the wayside. So I just wanted to add that piece because, the academic component really was huge during the, the technology piece, and this did not fall by the wayside. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. All right. So for the third question, I'm going to invite Erin Bernstein to answer first, followed by Andrea Flynn, and coming third will be David Graber. The question is, how do you intend to encourage the voices of parents in your decision-making processes?
So, I think the transparency that the board desires to provide is real. Value, and I know I value parent and community feedback. We have board meetings virtually every other Tuesday, twice a month on Tuesdays, where we welcome feedback from the community. We welcome comment, 2 comment periods, one where you can comment on the agenda, one that's more of an open comment period. Those are valuable and insightful times for us to hear directly from the community. We also have email as another mechanism, and we all get stopped at baseball games in the supermarket. I'm open to that. It's maybe not the best forum to always have a conversation in the middle of the supermarket, but if anyone has a question, I pride myself on being accessible, approachable. I want to hear. I'm always going to listen and take back the information, and encourage you to email the board directly as a unit, since we do actually operate as a unit, which is important for everyone to understand and sort of hard sometimes to appreciate. But I think we have some mechanisms that are available, and I'm open to other feedback as to how to make it better and to have more if there's more forums for communication. We often do have focus groups. We had a group that got together when we discussed the master schedule a few years ago. We had root cause analysis meetings, and we've had other community meetings around very specific topics, again, to elicit community feedback. So I hope that will continue as it relates to some of the larger projects that we have that are going on. And everyone should feel that they can, I'm here and I want to listen. I think it takes a village. We're even awesome.
Thank you. And Andrea.
Great. Thank you. Could you repeat the question for me, Debbie?
Certainly. How do you intend to encourage the voices of parents in your decision-making processes?
Thank you. I really appreciate this question. In the early days of our work as a PTSA DEI committee, we met with many, many, many parents who shared a lot of stories about their experiences in this district. Some good, some not so good, some ways that their kids are hurting and need to be served differently. And what I've learned in all of those meetings with so many parents and families is that there's a real gap, a real sort of spectrum in how people feel they're able to engage. Some people really understand the systems that are in place. They know how to email the board. They know to show up at board meetings. They feel safe to show up at board meetings and share their perspectives. And there are other parents who are working multiple jobs and can't come to board meetings and can't show up for coffees in the middle of the day with principals and don't know how to navigate board docs. And that's really hard. And I think in some ways we need to, yes, make available all these avenues that currently exist and, make them better known. But also I think in some ways we need to meet people where they are and find new and more clearer, more effective ways to communicate out to folks, to let them know about the good work the board is doing and the decisions they're making, but also to get more back from the community so that we're hearing from more folks and that we're hearing from folks who we don't always hear from. Sometimes we hear from the same voices a lot, and I think we want to hear from more parents who don't always come to things and don't always share.
Thank you. Thank you. David?
Thank you. Yeah, this is the reason why we do this work, right? We represent the community, we represent the parents' voices. So the idea about encouraging those voices, I want to talk a little bit about, we'll talk about it on a large scale and on a smaller scale, right? On a large scale, we talk about the district. I believe Ms. Bernstein referenced, the board meeting protocol for how we have comment periods, and we're not required to have two, but we have to so that we can hear from more people. To your point, Ms. Flynn, I wish more people would show up over the course of my 6 years. People I find only tend to show up when there are things that they really want answered. Having people engage more, I think, really has to happen on a more local level than at the board meeting level. Not with the board, but not at the board meeting level. I think that's something that arose over the last year or so. We need to be a little more clear about. But the idea that we have added 2 seats. When I started on this board, there were 5 seats. We moved to 7 seats so that we could provide more opportunity for people to join the board and get their voices heard. So that was when obviously we couldn't have 9 seats, 10 seats, but we moved to 7. The other thing we want to do is really open up our schools. I think schools wait for parents sometimes, and I think outside of the elementary experience, when you get to middle school and high school, I think if we open up the schools and schools begin to reach out to parents more effectively, I think that'll be great. There's the PAC process that I encourage. It's a really strong process. Please utilize that. The Parental Action Committee, I hope I'm using that acronym correctly. And lastly, before I stop, we started to create forums this year around the DEI work. That was a first for us. And I was at the forefront of suggesting that. So I'm really
Mr. Graber, we ran out of time. Thank you. All right, so the next question, number 4, is the first person to answer this question will be Andrea Flynn, followed by Erin Bernstein, and lastly, David Graber. The question is, do you support the school district's 2022-23 proposed budget? Why or why not?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I do support the budget that was just agreed upon and that we'll be voting on next week. I was really glad to see that the board and the district were able to keep the budget underneath the tax cap, which I know is a real priority for this district. I think the budget that has been agreed upon by the board shows that there's really significant work that we can achieve while remaining responsible budgets. There are the growth in certain areas, the addition of key faculty and staff that will really add to and improve the environment in the district. As we already mentioned, I'm really happy to see reflected in there the recent negotiation with faculty. I think the budget that's been agreed upon shows our ability to balance the immediate and long-term costs for programs and personnel and benefits with staying under the tax cap, and shows that we're able to maintain and really aim for strong and stronger schools, and that we can do that in a very fiscally responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Erin Bernstein.
As witnessed by my vote during the board meetings, I absolutely support the budget. I will add, though, just to sort of elaborate a little bit on like the process and the collaboration that goes on with that. It doesn't necessarily mean when you support an entire budget, that's multi-million dollars. There could be pieces of it that maybe you're not in love with. And I think I mentioned during the board meetings, I would have loved to have seen something other than a DEI stipend and actually a DEI coordinator to really advance the DEI work. And this partly could be because of where I live and breathe during the day and how I see that work evolves with dedicated staff. With that being said, it's a collaborative process, and overall, the budget was very much a mission-driven and a mission-centric process, and it was a very collaborative process amongst all of the schools where we came together, prioritized, focused, and came up with the budget was ultimately, pared down with the counselors, with the DEI coordinator, with a little bit more spend on an athletics person, with looking at improving our facilities and necessary items for that, paying for some additional tech. So I think overall, I think we have a really strong budget that's going to help to move the district forward, and it aligns really strongly with the mission of the district. And it's really a kid-focused budget, and the additions were really student-focused. And I think that for me is always a priority, that the additions align very closely with the mission, and that they focus on our students, right? Because that's why we're all here. It's for the kids. So that's it.
Thank you. David Graber.
Yes, I support the budget 100%. To note several items that stand out for me. Number one, our attention to special education is really important to me. It's been important to me since the beginning of my work on the board. The idea that we're increasing staffing to support our growth numbers, getting the hiring just right so we can, make sure that our kids have the best experience. We're going to be looking to hire a master reading teacher that's going to be certified in Norton Gillingham and Wilson reading, which are really important in the academic recovery process that I was talking about, in particular for our little ones entering Dow's Lane and the ones coming up in Dow's Lane over the next couple of years. Really big investment in those kids, and we really want to make sure that they are social, emotionally, and ready to learn. Number two, the tech professional learning piece in the budget is really important as well. As we move, as the pandemic taught us, we have lessons to learn, and we want to integrate technology in a really smart way. And by making that investment in professional learning, which is vital to that moving forward piece. Another component that I think worth mentioning is that the DEI coordinator, I differ than Ms. Bernstein here. I think, working in many schools, over 60 schools, that all have DEI coordinators, it really takes the load off of principals who can focus on that academic recovery. So I really support that position. And finally, while we are spending $600,000 more to add to our program, we are going to see a decrease in taxes. In your personal taxes, you will see a decrease. So this is a really, really responsible budget that I support fully.
Thank you. All right, so the next question, which is question number 5. David Graber.
Can I just clarify something? I just want to make sure that
as your rebuttal.
Yeah, that I clearly articulated. I actually support a DEI coordinator position versus the DEI stipend. So I hope I didn't say that I don't support a DEI coordinator, because that was not what I intended to say. I intended to say I support a coordinator versus the stipend, which is what is approved in the budget. Just wanted to clarify that. Sorry.
That's all right. Question number 5. The first person to answer question number 5 will be David Graber, followed by Andrea Flynn, and the third person to answer will be Erin Bernstein. So the question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge to our budget for the next few years, and what will you do to ensure fiscal responsibility?
That's a spectacular question. So one of the reasons, I'm going to piggyback off of what I was just saying, one of the reasons why we're seeing an actual personal tax decrease is because of a landmark. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but a landmark case that won in the favor of all the students of New York State, which is the Foundation Aid case, where the Foundation Aid is being fully restored across the state over the next 3 to 5 years. So that funding that we're being, that's mitigating tax increases is going to be around for at least the next 3 to 5 years, and using that wisely is a priority. And for instance, building in programs like, for example, bringing in a master reading teacher, right? Taking a look at how we can keep kids in district, right? And so, there are different ways that we can contain the budget. I think, being fiscally responsible is a key piece. And by adding these kinds of programs and using the foundation aid the way we are, we're going to have the ability to remain fiscally responsible over the next 3 to 5 years. And that landscape will inevitably change as we can see. So thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Flynn?
Thank you for that question. I think there will be a number of budget challenges in the year ahead, right? We're looking at inflation right now. People are feeling that in their pocketbooks every day or when we go to get gas. So we are potentially, approaching a more challenging economic time along with other school districts. So I know the board and the administration will be considering that carefully as we look at future budgets, and we're looking at what pressures families are facing and what the district is facing as the state faces various economic pressures as well. I think one issue that I'm particularly interested in, as I've raised before, is thinking about not only how we maintain our current strategic planning and commitment to DEI, and I agree with David that the board should be applauded for maintaining that commitment through the pandemic when there were a number of other areas where we could have diverted attention and resources. And I think, as we've done this work and realized where the gaps are in the district, we're also going to notice where we need more funding and where what other areas are that we need to focus on that could potentially demand costs. I do think a good contract with the staff will help control costs. And so I think that's a really good sign.
Thank you. Erin Bernstein.
So to echo what Andrea said, I think inflation is probably one of the biggest issues that we will face going forward. When we look at utility costs and health insurance costs, just general inflation as it relates to gas to use our maintenance machines, whatever that might be. And it is great, to Andrea's point, that we've locked into an extensive agreement with our faculty, so we at least understand what our salary expense will be over the years. But I think inflation is definitely out there looming, and it's a very big unknown that's threatening all districts and all schools across the country. I think the other really challenge that we're facing is on the social and emotional plane. I think we have families, students, teachers who are all they're fatigued, they're anxious, they're stressed. And I think being able to support that as a district, right? They all spend more time in the school than they do at home. So being able to support that and to find the resources to support that, even just finding mental health counselors is challenging. Hiring right now is also really, really challenging. Finding good teachers to bring to the district is challenging. So there are a lot of pressures right now, I think, as it relates to inflation, staffing, and maintaining social and emotional health of our community.
Can I add to that, Debbie, as one of my rebuttals? I just want to add to and echo what Erin's saying about how hard it is to retain staff, knowing that hiring and retention is very difficult right now. And I think, our work to assess our own school environment, to hear from teachers and staff about what they're experiencing, what pressures they're under, where they need more support, is really critically important, and obviously has budget implications. But I do think Irvington is sort of facing those same challenges that other districts are facing in terms of retaining really good, talented staff. And obviously the less turnover we have in this district in our classrooms and at the administration level is that stability is good for our students.
Thank you. All right, question number 6 is coming out. The first person to answer will be Erin Bernstein, followed by David Graber, and third will be Andrea Flynn. And the question is, our tax burden is very high. Can you explain how to control tax increases in our district?
There's the competing priorities, right? So I think first thing to note is that our taxes are not just driven by an increase in a school budget, they're also driven by market values. So when we look at how the real estate market has performed over the last year, that's going to drive just a default increase to property taxes. Values go up, the rate may stay the same, but your market value has been assessed higher, therefore the dollars that you're paying are higher. In terms of maintaining, if you, to Dave's point, if you looked at what Carol forecasted for the tax increase for next year, she's actually forecasting a slight decrease in what taxpayers will pay due to the school budget, which is only a component of all of your property taxes. It's monitoring. One of the biggest costs within the budget is headcount and personnel. So having great collaboration and understanding with our teachers and staff to understand where salaries can go over the next several years and kind of locking that in is one way to help, I'll say, control it. They're going to increase, right? Just like most people here have pay increases every year. They will increase. That's the biggest component. And then it's monitoring how many additional headcounts are we adding every year and controlling that cost as well. So those are the biggest drivers of a school budget, so personnel, and then things we don't have control of are inflation. So it's also about making choices. So I always equate this, Andrea brought up how we're all paying more to fill up our gas tank. Some of us that have really tight budgets are making decisions and choices about filling up a gas tank, and maybe they're buying a little less at a supermarket or whatever it is, but it's about balancing and it's a choice.
Thank you very much.
We do it. Thanks.
All right,
Sorry.
David Graber. Would you like
Repeat
me
the
to
question,
repeat the
please?
question? Yes, I will. The tax burden is very high. Can you explain how to control tax increases in our district?
Thank you. Big question in everybody's mind. I'm going to start again by indicating that, in fact, we're working on that now. We've been working on that over the last 6 years that I've been on the board, and can hopefully continue to do that. As you can see, as Erin just referenced, and I referenced earlier, you're going to see a tax decrease this year, small, albeit, but still a decrease. So if that's not managing taxes, I don't know what is. Erin also pointed to the fact that the largest portion of any school budget is the instructional budget. And what's tied to the instructional budget are teacher salaries and pension plans and health insurance and all of those different pieces. Okay, so all of those pieces, I'm going to also, build on what Erin was saying and saying that, what I talked about before, negotiating a smart contract is a huge piece of that and controlling that number, right? I think what's the alternative, right? The alternative is cutting programs, right? Moving away from the high quality of a standard that we're used to serving our children. So while we're confronted with, a real dilemma in terms of how we can do that, I'm going to reference back to the foundation aid component that's going to be around for the next few years that we're going to be able to work with. And I think that if we keep our reserves, in a healthy fashion, I think that we'll continue to maintain a really strong approach to budgeting.
Thank you.
Yes, no sign needed. Thank you.
All right, Andrea Flynn.
Great, thanks. I just want to say I really appreciate the question. I know our high taxes are burdensome for many folks, and that they are the reason some people aren't able to move to our community and others move and are put in the position of having to make tough choices. So before I answer, I just want to acknowledge that as a pain that many people feel in their lives. Some in this community don't feel it, but that, we are all sort of shouldering that tax burden differently. I agree with David that negotiating the contract is helpful. Again, here I mentioned that before. I think it both ensures the economic well-being of the employees of our district. It also ensures the economic stability and dependability of our district as a whole. And, as Erin said, I think this is about decisions that, hard decisions that we're going to have to make. And, those decisions will change based on what our larger economic context is, what the strategic plans of the board are at the time. I think what the board has shown over the past couple of years is it's able to advance strategic priorities without increasing the taxes of folks in this district, and that's a serious concern. And I would look forward to carrying that forward if I'm elected to the board.
Thank you. All right, question number 7. We are coming up. And the first person to answer that question will be Andrea Flynn, followed by Erin Bernstein, and third, David Graber. The question is, what are your thoughts on the recently proposed draft regulations to ensure substantial equivalency in non-public schools.
Great. Could you repeat the question one more time?
What are your thoughts on the recently proposed draft regulations to ensure substantial equivalency in non-public schools?
Great. So I am familiar with the new regulations that came out from the New York State on equivalency. And just for, I think a lot of folks who don't know, this notion is that non-public school students should have the same level of education as public school students as the state mandates. I know other districts in our area and around us have been dealing with this issue for a while. And if I remember correctly, the regulations that came out suggested that local school districts work with neighboring school districts and also collaborate with BOCES, acknowledging that some of the capacity and skills that are required to navigate this issue might be a heavy burden for small districts, particularly districts like ours. And so partnering with other districts and really leveraging some of the resources and skills of BOCES is important for a matter like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Am I next?
Yes, Erin Bernstein, please.
So yes, I too am familiar with this district. I'm living it on both sides. I work for a non-public school, and there are a lot of ideas out there about whether or not maybe a school, non-public school that gets accredited through an accredited committee, like a NICES for New York State not independent schools, perhaps would be excluded from this. I do think this puts a heavy burden on districts in general, especially on small districts. I actually think it should go back to the state. I don't think it should necessarily be monitored on a local level. I think that if it was monitored on a state level with a department within the state, it would be monitored in a consistent manner, and it would be applied consistently to all schools across the state. I think once you start pushing it down and sort of decentralizing that task, it's expensive and it won't be applied consistently. So I actually would advocate that it gets pushed back to the state level, and whether they just choose to decide to then monitor it through an accredited institutions or some other level, I think that could be appropriate. But I definitely don't support the idea of a local school district taking this on. This is not something that our district certainly has an expertise in. It would require additional budgeting. Could it be done through BOCES? That's a possibility. But again, I think it's distracting us from the core mission of what our district does. And that's about educating the kids within our school. And I think that that's important. And I really wish that the state would think about how they could structure it at their level to do what they know needs to be done. They're monitoring things like this already with non-public schools through funding and things like that. So that's my idea. I don't know if that'll go anywhere.
Thank you. David Graber.
Yeah, so I'm going to just piggyback right there. It's about funding, right? Like this is the classic definition of an unfunded mandate. I'm like Erin said, I've actually lived this in New York City. Here we were unfortunately, and I'm going to give you my perspective. I actually agree with Andrea in this, in that BOCES is really the place, the right entity to handle this kind of work. They're positioned perfectly to do that because they have partnerships with school districts. So those school districts can work together to ensure the delivery of a high quality education. I'm not going to repeat what everybody else said, but I will say that I also agree with Erin here. This is not something that we can take on in a small district because it's an unfunded component. So if it's not going to be funded, right, and then we need to find the best solution. And the best solution is always a partnership. And we have a really strong partnership with our BOCES entity. And I think we should continue to move in that direction with this particular piece.
Thank you. I just want to point out that we are approaching 8 o'clock. By the time we finish the next round, we will be there. I was requested to continue going. Is everyone in agreement on that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I saw one yes. We are approaching 8 o'clock. By the time we reach the end of this round of questions, we will be pretty much close to it. And I would like an indication from the candidates that they wish to continue answering questions and go beyond 8 o'clock. Or if you would prefer to go answer this round of questions and then go to closing statements.
I'm happy to continue to answer constituents' questions.
Same.
Okay. So the next question, the first person to answer will be David Graber, followed by Andrea Flynn, and third answer will be Erin Bernstein. And the question is, what do you think the district policy should be in working with students of all ages with gender identity questions?
You know, that's a really powerful question. I think, you know, I'm going to get to my answer at the end there. But what I'm going to do is couch it in culturally responsive sustaining education philosophy. Okay. And what that means really is thinking about a welcoming and affirming environment for children, regardless of who they are, right? So that's really important. What's a part of that is making sure that, you know, all children have resources within classrooms that support the way they think and live, right? Do I think that that stuff needs to be happening down in pre-K and kindergarten and first grade? Not necessarily. So that's, you know, partially towards that answer. But I do think that we need to create the environment in which, you know, can you repeat the question again, just so I...
Sure. What do you think the district policy should be in working with students of all ages with gender identity questions?
Okay, so at the early ages, you know, I think it's not necessarily a focus. Doesn't need to be a focus for us. I think, you know, especially with the academic recovery that we're going to need to have over the next couple of years. I do think with our older students, however, you know, and I think through the building of really powerful classroom libraries and culturally sustaining libraries in classrooms, that we provide opportunities for students to think about these, you know, affirming race, class, gender, sexual orientation, and providing an inclusive space to talk about things, to build it into the literature that kids are reading so that they can study it through different conflict and characters in the ELA class, look at it historically through social studies, but really thinking about, like, you know, the way that from a social justice perspective at the older ages to really think about gender.
Thank you. Andrea Flynn.
Thank you. I think this is a really important question. And I just want to respond to something David said. You know, I don't think it's an either or. Either we are gender inclusive in our classrooms, or we're focused on sort of rebuilding and addressing some of the issues that our students have faced over the last few years. I trust that our teachers have or will have, through the training that we've been doing at this school, and by partnering with other organizations like Welcoming Schools and others that know how to have these conversations in a very age-appropriate way, that we should be integrating conversations about gender identity, again, in an age-appropriate way, which is entirely possible in all classrooms in our district, starting at an early age. I think this is not only to be responsive to students who may be non-conforming or LGBTQ in our classrooms, and certainly those students exist in our earlier years, but also so that our students are equipped to understand, support, and be part of an inclusive community as they do get older. You know, we can't just start having these conversations all of a sudden in 5th grade. We can, through age-appropriate ways, give all students the skills to really understand what they and their peers are experiencing in terms of gender identity. And the last thing I'll say is that these kids are going to encounter these questions and challenges, whether we like it or not. They consume media, they have iPads. And so it is in our best interest and their best interest to start teaching them how to have those questions and think about these issues at a very early age.
Thank you. Erin Bernstein.
So I also think that there's an age appropriate way to have this discussion. And I think part of it revolves around not enforcing gender stereotypes. So I think to the extent that teachers understand how to not enforce gender stereotypes, that's starting a discussion with younger children about gender identity and things like that. It doesn't have to be necessarily so overt, but it can just be simple things about whether or not, you know, girls are wearing dresses all the time, or whether or not playing with dolls or boys with cars or things like that, where we gender stereotype. So I think breaking that down in the language that we use, I think is part of that age appropriate education. It may not be a very direct, doesn't necessarily mean it's a direct conversation depending on the students that you're dealing with. But to Andrea's point, kids are seeing this now on social media in so many different ways. And books are changing. If you go to a library, there are books there. Like, there's a lot more information out there. And with the pandemic, with kids being on devices so much more than they ever were, and interfacing maybe outside their bubble more than they were electronically, it's there. So I think finding a way that we can talk about it in an age appropriate way, I do think is the way to do it. I would also say, I don't know that there's a policy around this. I think it's what we're really talking about is how things can be incorporated into the curriculum. I don't know that we would have a policy around how we have this discussion, but we might have curriculum that can support it in a manner, again, that's age appropriate. So.
Thank you.
I'd like to take my
You go
second
ahead first,
rebuttal
Andrea.
here. Oh, sorry.
No, you go first.
I just want to say, I think that there are a number of teachers who are eager to incorporate these issues in their classroom and don't necessarily feel skilled or capable or know how to have them at different age levels, right? I experience this myself. I have conversations with my college students all the time, and having them with my own kids is a bit harder. So I do think when we think of the kind of training that our faculty needs, that this for me falls under that broad DEI bucket, and really equipping teachers to have hard and really honest conversations with our students across all grades.
Thank you. David Graber, did you want to have a rebuttal as well? You're on mute.
Yep, sorry about that. One thing I wanted to tack on to what my colleagues here were saying, is that we really going to go back to the question about parent voice here a little bit. I think, it's a really critical component of this topic. I think you really want to do this, especially Erin, as you were referring to curriculum and how can we find ways to do this in the curriculum, and Andrea, you were talking about teachers finding opportunities to do this in the classroom. I think there are two things that we have to think about before we can even step into that arena. One is how are we engaging parents around that, right? What is the conversation with parents? What's the partnership there, so that we can, maintain any sensitivities? And I think the second piece, go ahead, I got the stop. So
No, go ahead. I'm okay. Oh.
No, it's okay. I got the stop.
Sure? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Parent voice is critical.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of leverage off that as well. I think part of the challenge is making sure that parents are aware of how it's being instructed within the classroom, and they're aware of the timing of when some of these conversations may occur, so that when the child goes home, to Andrea's point, the parents aren't sort of blindsided by it. And I think and the parents need an education and some professional development into also how to have these conversations, because it's I look at my generation, I've said this, it's new. I didn't grow up with all of this, right? So I'm learning it. For our kids, it's becoming much more natural. They're being programmed sort of to understand this, and program's not really a good word, but it's natural for them. For me, I'm learning it. So I think that that's an important part, is that parents also understand how it's being taught and when it's being taught, so conversations can continue.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to add one more thing or no?
No, you're out of rebuttals. Number 9. The first person to answer this question will be Erin Bernstein, followed by David Graber, and then Andrea Flynn. The question is, the district has come up with a plan to implement culturally responsive education and practices in the district. How has this plan progressed, and what are your top priorities moving forward?
So we've talked about the root analysis study that happened within our district. I think a lot of it comes down to furthering the professional development of our staff and developing the curriculum that goes along with this education. I think another component of it is, I think, doing this all without, I just attended a DEI conference, and this was sort of a soundbite that I took away from it, but without shame and blame. So I think continuing to allow kids to feel a part of the conversation, parents to feel a part of the conversation, and taking away the shame and blame from that conversation as it's occurring within the district. But I think we're going to continue to develop the curriculum. We're going to continue to evaluate how we're hiring teachers, how we're retaining teachers, and move that work forward. All that came out of the root cause analysis that was conducted recently. So it's moving all that forward. That's my brief comment.
Thank you. David Graber.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The district has come up with a plan to implement culturally responsive education and practices in the district. How has this plan progressed, and what are your top priorities moving forward?
So I know that the plan is progressing really, is moving along nicely. I believe that we're currently thinking about how we're auditing curriculum and digging in using the scorecard. And basically what a scorecard is, it asks teachers or groups of teachers to go in and evaluate the resources that are in classrooms, making sure that they're inclusive for all learners. So I know that's where we are as a district. The work takes a lot of time. And I think what's clear is that there's a lot of professional learning that needs to come through in that. And what I do is I want to take this moment to sort of break down what CRSE is, which is culturally, well, it doesn't matter. I can't done enough with the acronyms, but CRSE, right? Culturally responsive and sustaining education, is about creating welcome and affirming environments for students, ensuring high expectations and academic rigor, inclusive curriculum and assessment, and ongoing professional learning. Those are the 4 key frames for culturally responsive learning. So when we think about those 4 things, in order to implement that stuff and to really raise the level of academic rigor, there's a lot of professional learning that's there to start building programs that develop projects around social justice issues, or thinking about inclusive spaces, or thinking about student-led civic engagement, thinking about how you can use resources that are developed by, how about kids starting to co-design curriculum with teachers, right? How do we find student leaders so that the curriculum is more inclusive? And again, professional learning. How do we support teachers in conducting cross-curricular, culturally responsive, sustaining planning? This takes a lot. Selecting the right text for students to read and analyzing them with the right kinds of questions.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this question. Thank you. I want to start by saying when we talk about CRSE and our DEI work, that this is really about people's lived experiences. This is about the lives of families and children and how they experience this district, how they're able to move around this district and our community. And I think sometimes we get lost in policies and practices and surveys, which are all really important. But at the end of the day, we're doing all of that work so that all of our kids can succeed in this district. So I just want to say that up front. I have helped lead this work. I got us to a place where we could embark on our root cause analysis and the lead learner trainings, both of which I participated in and am now a lead learner myself. I think there are a number of priorities. Again, I want to thank the district for taking on this work and being committed to it. I think having a better assessment of our school culture and environment is critically important, particularly for retaining and recruiting staff. We have lost 3 women of color staff over the last year. And I think it's important for us to ask questions about what is it like for folks of color who teach in this school, and what can we do as a whole community to ensure that we're able to bring in a real diverse range of faculty and staff so that our staff reflects the rich diversity of our students. I think really understanding the intersections here, right? So looking at how students of color and kids with disabilities and low-income kids are all impacted, and there's a real overlap between many of those categories. So I think really our work in the next few years is digging a little deeper and looking at those issues.
Thank you. Okay, question 10. The first person to answer this will be Andrea Flynn, followed by Erin Bernstein, and third, David Graber. And I would like to suggest that we're now at several minutes after 8, that this will be the final question, and then we will go to closing statements. All right, so the question is, recognizing and confronting racial bias in education is important to many members of our community. What do you see as your role as a leader in this work?
First?
Yes.
Okay.
Andrea Flynn.
Thank you. Thanks for this question. As I mentioned before, I have been one of the parents leading this work at the district for the past few years. I've co-led that work with another a mom of color in this district. And that has, engaging in this work has required asking some hard questions about myself, about my white privilege, my socioeconomic privilege, and really how I build partnerships across race and class. And so I've been, that's hard work that we all need to do to engage in this space. And there's not, I think one of the things we say is it's not the destination, it's the journey. And we're on this journey for a long time. And so there's not one way to just be in this space. We're constantly doing the work and asking hard questions. And so I think for me, sort of digging deep on those parts of my identity has been really important. It's also a journey that I continue to be on, and one that I really look forward to continuing being on if I'm elected to the board. And I think an important role for me and people like me is to know when to ask hard questions and to leverage our different positions in the community to know when to ask hard questions, who to have hard conversations with, how to push them forward. And I think doing this within the board would be really important and satisfying work. And I would really look forward to working with all of the current board members to continue what they've started with the current work that we've been doing.
Thank you. Erin.
So I think it starts with listening to the community. As Andrea mentioned, this is also about people's stories and what they've gone through and what the experiences are, and help to evolve that. I think it's about modeling good behavior and having those appropriate relationships. And I also think as a board member, it's really about ensuring that the district has clear goals around this. And I think at times, and I see this even professionally, I think it's hard to understand what the actual goal is of what we're trying to accomplish, right? We know we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, breaking down systems to ensure that everybody has access and can thrive in Irvington, right? So it's how does everybody thrive? So I think really clearly articulating the goals of the work, I think is really important for the board, for the district, and for the community, so that we understand ultimately what path we're on and where we're hoping to be and what that time frame looks like.
Thank you. David?
Can you repeat the question, please? Going last is its disadvantages.
Recognizing and confronting racial bias in education is important to many members of our community. What do you see as your role as a leader in this work?
So there are several different ways I see this work as a leader, both professionally and as a volunteer in Irvington. One, I want to think about school-wide systems and structures for success in this work, right? Making sure that we have an inclusive environment. We want to think about how all school efforts and structures, resources, people, how all those things align around a clear school-wide vision of equitable learning, right? And development of a shared understanding of how and what drives that work. I think that's fundamental to this piece. I think the second piece is that professional processes, structures, and cultures build the individual and collective efficacy of educators and staff while supporting their personal well-being and providing opportunities for ongoing inquiry for them. I think as a leader, systemic use of a broad range of disaggregated quantitative and qualitative data, such as root cause analysis, to enhance equitable opportunity, experience, and success. Differentiated opportunities for students to develop and demonstrate mastery in standards with punitive or discriminatory grading practices identified and eliminated. School structures that promote student leadership and agency. Time and learning opportunities. I mean, I can go down the list here. Cultivating authentic learning experiences, and the goals of discipline policies and practices are to support student learning and development rather than to punish and exclude students. I mean, I can keep going down the list of all the different school-wide structures that need to be focused on as a leader of this work. That's just a handful of them, right? And in my last probably 10 seconds, what I want to say is that we really need to employ a critical lens to this work so that we don't ignore or marginalize diverse students.
Thank you. All right, we are now going to go.
Oh, can I just add to that? I just want to.
Sorry, I can't. Everybody's had their rebuttals, and we've got to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Okay, sorry.
It's all right. Just want to make sure everybody's got an even playing field.
Yeah, no. I guess I lost track of the count.
All right, so now we're on to closing statements. So the order of closing statements, David Graeber will deliver his closing statement first, followed by Erin Bernstein, and third will be Andrea Flynn. You each have 1 minute. David Graeber.
So thank you very much. In closing, I'd like to really close out this really great conversation. I wish we could have more of these by saying how proud I am to live in a town where we have this opportunity to give back in a meaningful way. You know, I'm particularly thankful to both Ms. Bernstein and Ms. Flynn for running and offering their time to support our kids. I think it's really important to the process. I'm going to leave you with, you know, a real basic notion. I am the best candidate for this work because I live it, I breathe it, and I love it. You know, being able to help secure both your kids and mine scholastic future is important to me. And I have what it takes to give back in this capacity to provide my professional board, not only my professional experience, but my board experience to continue propelling us forward. That's what my campaign is about, success and opportunity for growth. And I leave you with this quote: organizations that are successful are focused, have consistent leadership at the center, invest in frontline school-based leadership and peer-based learning, and use data to confirm success and make corrections. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Erin Bernstein.
I'm going to keep it simple. I also am privileged to be here, and it's been an honor to serve on the board for the past 3 years. And I'm looking forward to keeping that momentum going. In the first term, you get what I would say your sea legs, and you kind of figure everything out and figure out a lot of the processes. And now I'm looking forward to, with that knowledge, moving things ahead even more. The other thing I think it's important to note that it's important to have a board with balanced skill sets. I have a unique financial skill, and it's an integral part of building a very strong team. So again, it's been a privilege to support the district, and I appreciate everyone's continued support, and I wish everyone well, and this has been a pleasure. Thank you. And thank you again, Susan and Deb.
Andrea.
Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for bringing us together tonight, and to Erin and David for this great discussion. I agree, wish we could do it more. I would be really honored to bring my energy and expertise to this role, and I think new perspective and new ideas are really critical at this moment. I've told you a bit about myself tonight. I'm an established and committed issue area expert. I'm a skilled communicator, a bridge builder, and a passionate and dedicated advocate for our children and our community more broadly. In all of my work, professional and volunteer, I'm a team player, and I know that's a critical quality of members of this board. And as a school board member, I will build on Irvington's many strengths, and there are many of them, and help tackle difficult challenges that we've yet to overcome by working to improve communication with families, strengthening community engagement, and elevating voices of parents and students, and keeping a watchful eye on how we spend our resources. I hope I can earn your vote on May 17th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I applaud all three of you. I think Irvington is a very lucky community to have three individuals who clearly did their homework and came prepared and are offering themselves and their time for service. I applaud all three of you. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Reisner. Thank you, Ms. Maggiotto.
You're more than welcome.
Everyone, good to see you.
And again, thanks, Andrea and Erin and everybody for coming. A whole community,
Yeah.
60 people.
Hi, community.
Everyone.
May I just remind everyone about the vote?
You just went on mute, Susan.
Oh, May 17th, vote, May 17th.
Please vote May 17th.
In the gym this year, Main Street Gym, not the auditorium, the gym.
Excellent. Thank you all. And with that, we will end this forum. Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.